real professional studio I have here.
You need an audio level?
I know, it was like we're doing this podcast, and I said to Pat, you better have your gear in shape ready to go because you're dealing with a professional man who...
Not really.
Yeah.
It's just fine.
Yeah, no, I know. But it is hard, I'm sure, having spent your entire life in sound.
Well, I'm not used to being on this side of the microphone.
Ah, yes, that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no.
You know.
But you should be spending some time on this side of the microphone because you are a very important, pivotal person in the world of sound.
I was there at the beginning, and so if you're old enough, stick around, and it happens.
Yeah.
I'm glad I was there when I was.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't want to do it anymore today. It's a totally different world,
Yes.
Especially in the theater.
Oh, I can only imagine. Yeah, we'll talk about some of that. Yeah, just to let you know, we've started our podcast. I have Abe Jacob on, and he is the Godfather of Sound. And that's a real statement. That's other people that have said that, not just me, right?
That's correct. I always said, always the Godfather, never a God. But
I bet at some time the people that you were helping did think you were a god.
Almost.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work to do in those days.
Yeah, like Bob Fosse when he was having a problem and you figured out what was going on. Yeah.
It was a matter of just experimentation and thinking what would work and what was the simplest way of doing things, and that was sort of the start of it all. But
common sense, logic.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you have a lot of that actually.
I think so. Yeah, I think that I never quite thought about it that way, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense reading your
Mm-hmm.
book that when you figured out things like for Jesus Christ Superstar, and you said, oh, we can't use these mics, these wireless mics, because you're getting all the thing from the traffic and everything. What can we do? And you figured out.
Back to my microphones on cords, wired microphones, because we used those in hair originally. And and it worked there. Fortunately, Tom O'Horgan, who was directing that production of Superstar, agreed. And so we did. I came to New York. I was on tour with Three Dog Night in Miami, and we had a day off or a weekend off, and so I went up to New York to see friends doing Superstar because it was supposed to be performing.
Right.
People that I knew from my hair days, and so I got to the theater, and it was a sign on the lobby door saying performance canceled. So I went backstage to see if I could see what was going on, and ran into Tom O'Horgan. They said, we're having sound problems. I said, oh. Can you help? I said, well, what seems to be the problem? And they said it was wireless microphone problems. That these microphones came over from England, and they worked over there, but they don't work here, obviously. And the man who was doing the sound design at the time was hired by the producer because he had done the sound at Madison Square Garden for the was it the concert for Bangladesh? Or one of those,
big one.
One of those big ones, and so we did. And I came in, talked to Tom. I said, "Let's just put handheld mics on the stage. Let them sing into that." They restaged the rehearsal, and 2 days later, I gave them their first performance.
Mm-hmm.
And then I changed the loudspeaker system out and brought stuff that I knew from California that worked.
Yes.
And
they hid the mics too,
right?
And
the microphones were disguised by the set designer Robin Wagner.
Yes.
Has grapevines, and so we wrapped grape cords around them, and then that worked. But
common sense, all that's common sense.
That's it.
And paying attention, you knew what was going on in London,
just to do it as simple as possible, and then then eventually wireless microphones became the standard, and now you can't do a show without them. So.
Right. Yes.
But I tried to eliminate wireless microphones as long as I could.
Yes, because of the added issues?
Added issues, the quality, and the fact that when you have a microphone close to the mouth, there's a whole different quality of sound than it is if you're just projecting to an area microphone like this.
Yes.
It made it more realistic. But they don't want realism today. They want, they want special effects and immersive sound, which is what the norm is now on Broadway.
Which is completely and utterly different than how you saw it. But I have no doubt if you were doing it today that you would be able
I would
to
find some way of doing it.
Yeah, you would adapt, and you would be like, I think we should use AI or something potentially here as well. I'm sure that is probably
correct. Yeah, I mean, I go back to an old saying of Mark Twain's when asked, "Do you like to exercise?" And he said, "Whenever I get the urge to exercise, I lie down until the urge passes." And so I lie down until the urge passes to do those other kinds of shows.
But do you keep up to kind of understanding what the technology is?
Oh, I do. I still have. I still get all of the literature and magazines, and keep up with friends of mine who are doing the work today. And, and they'll eventually call and ask a couple of questions about technique rather than the electronics that they're doing today.
Right. I guess what you have a deep well to choose from that.
Fortunately, I have what I remember is still pretty good, but
yeah, I can tell. There's no lapse here. Well, and let's just talk a little bit about, because you're a Tucson boy.
Yes.
I mean, that was, I think, the most fascinating thing when I saw this. Oh my gosh, he's born in Tucson.
I got my start at Mary McMurtry's Children's Theater.
Yes.
And did a couple of shows with her. Then I played Tad Lincoln and Abe Lincoln in Illinois for the University Players.
Right.
And a walk-on a Ronald Reagan movie at Old Tucson. And,
right.
And then I decided that, I didn't want to do that anymore, so I got backstage. And that's where I stopped, but the bug bit me for sound.
Yes, and you're 9 by that time that's going on, right? You're born in 1944, and your dad's a restaurateur, right?
He and my uncle started a restaurant called the Club 21,
right?
Which was here from 1946 to 2009, I guess.
Wow, yeah, it was like 75 years, right?
73, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you had a difficult childhood too. I mean, it was clearly not an easy road.
No, my mother was killed when I was 5 in an automobile accident, and so I lived. My aunt took me in until my father remarried, and then we moved out to the east side of town, way out East Speedway, which is, I think, now inside the city limits, but it was 15 miles out.
Right. Yeah, you were isolated.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that isolation that you're out there. You're the only child, right?
No, my father, his second wife had a daughter, my stepsister, and then she had 2 children of her own before. So,
but before that, before he met her in 1955, you were alone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and
my aunt and uncle, who I stayed with, didn't have any children until after I left. So.
Yes. Do you think any of that had influenced you into sound?
I had never really thought about it. I think that maybe I was more in tune to doing things on my own that way. So
I'm sure
that may have been it.
I mean, because you would get ignited when you do these plays, but not as an actor, but as I like all this stuff that's going on in the play.
Correct, and being backstage was much more interesting to me than performing in front of an audience.
Yes.
Even though we are performing kind of in a way, the work we're doing is for the audience. So.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, you're very well aware of what audience is. I mean, that's part of what you do as a sound designer, I guess, is trying to fit the situation to the play or to the concert, and it's all
a matter of creating the whole so it all is puts together as a one cohesive package. The scenery, the music, the words, the actors, all of the technical events, all need to mesh together to become a whole, and that's, I think, important.
Right. I mean, it's interesting how I found out about you. I'm at a party, or I'm at Tim's Kennedy's house, and I see this picture of Lauren Bacall and this man, and I'm like, that's Lauren Bacall. Why is that in here? And he said, you need to know my friend Abe. And I was like, why is he with Lauren Bacall? He goes, he's a sound designer, one of the greatest there ever was. And I'm like, okay, I don't understand any of this, but I would like to know more. Maybe you can share. So
that's how this all came about. Huh?
That is how it came about. Because I was very intrigued.
I still don't know how Tim ended up with that picture, but it was, it's in the book, I think. Also.
It is in the book.
But she was a terrific woman to work with, and the music was called A Woman of the Year.
Mm.
And we were performing in San Francisco at the time, before we went into New York.
Yes.
So,
And you became friends.
and we became friends
Yes.
through the time of that performance. And I ran into her a few years later on she was in Lincoln Center, and
Yes.
she said, "Hi, Betty," and I said, "Hi, Abe, how are you?" I said, "Could you give me a ride home?" I said, I got to put her in a cab and took her to the Dakota where she lived. But
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, and I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, we know who she is, but I mean, she was married to Jason Robart and Humphrey Bogart, and was one of the most noted actresses of her day, right?
Yeah, correct, absolutely, really brilliant.
Yes.
And I think Woman of the Year was the last. It was the last stage production that she did.
Mm. She must have gotten you on some intellectual level, I think, from what you were doing.
We got along relatively well, fortunately. Yeah, I think we did okay.
Yeah, I can tell. I can see your face, though. and so that's how I found out about you. And now I understand a little bit of the backstory of Tucson. And you get interested in sound. You're already interested in sound at, it sounds like 9 years of age, right?
Right.
Your father remarries, moves to Oakland in 1955. And then maybe you can fill in the story from there.
For some strange reason, I decided to go to high school in San Francisco. So I became a commuter from Oakland across the Bay Bridge on the trolley at that time to St. Ignatius High School, which was out on the...
That's a scary thing for a kid.
Yeah, it was. But I enjoyed it. I just pretended I was one of the older men going to work. Eventually, I had my own car, but that was until the senior year. So it was in high school that I got really involved in theater sound, doing a sound for the high school productions, for both their musicals and the straight plays. And so,
Yes.
And as I say in the book, that's how I ended up working with a company called McCune Sound in San Francisco. We would go there to rent the equipment for the high school productions. And my word of advice to everybody starting out is become a pest. Bother the people that you want to be with, and let them know that you care and you want to be around them. So
and you did that with McCune?
I did that with McCune, and so
he must have seen it too. That this
they were very, very, very kind and very helpful. And that's how I started on the road with the rock and roll acts and doing concerts and all
and
that
your
sort of
first
stuff.
one is when you finish, what is it, 1966, right?
66.
Right, you graduated from college at Loyola Marymount.
It was Loyola in those days.
Yeah.
It wasn't Loyola Marymount until much later. Then I went back to San Francisco and started working sort of full-time with McCune.
Yeah.
And did a bunch of shows for them and ended up...
the first show was pretty interesting that you did. You should not just glaze over that with the Beatles.
Well, we did a concert in Candlestick Park.
Right, their last concert.
The last
right?
concert.
Yeah.
There's an interesting sidelight to that. In 2011, 2010, Paul McCartney did a musical for the New York City Ballet. He composed the score for a thing called Ocean's Kingdom. And he was interested. It was a nice score. Not a great ballet, but it was wonderful. So he came in to listen to the orchestra rehearsals, and he came in the door, and I was introduced to him by the ballet director, and he said, "Oh, Abe, nice to meet you." And I said, "Well, actually, we have met once before." And he said, "Well, when was that?" I said, "Well, 1966, Candlestick Park, San Francisco, your last concert." And he said, "Oh, well, I guess it's time we work together again, isn't it?" So,
he's a very kind person, isn't he?
So we did that. That was nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So your first gig out of college is Candlestick Park with McCune
and the Beatles.
That's a pretty good start.
I was just moving microphones, but I
don't care.
But it was there, so
I guarantee you, McCune was very cognizant of who he had working with him.
Yes. Yeah.
He knew who the Beatles were. He knew who these individuals were. He might have even known it might have been one of the very last concerts.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But Mort Feld was the man at McCune's that I sort of glommed onto, and he was the one that kind of let me, going on, do all the good things that I did basically through him and through Harry McCune Jr. So.
Yes. And then right away, so this is like 66, you go with the Mamas and the Papas.
Yep. I had, through Lou Adler, who was their producer, through another friend, met and went out on the road with them. And they didn't work very much. They think maybe in the whole 67 through 70, 69, may have done 30 concerts or something.
Yeah, but they were huge.
They're big. They were,
They were monsters. And you're 22 years old. Mm-hmm. I mean, that to me, that's the most amazing thing is that you're 22 years old.
Well, everybody has to be 22 at one time or another.
Yeah, but not working with the Mamas and the Papas on tour.
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like as far as kind of opening your eyes to the world
they were
and
so
drugs and everything else?
They were so well balanced musically that it was not a great deal of difficulty to do.
But as a person, I mean, I understand it as a sound designer, you focus on it, but you're still a 22-year-old kid thrown into one of the most...
I grew up very fast.
Yeah, I would think, right? I mean, there's all sorts of things around those people when you're at these concerts, right? I mean, whatever they may be, drugs or just the lifestyle.
Yeah, no, but you have to, keep focused on what you're doing and stay that way,
Yes. And even at 22, you had that. Yeah, yeah.
So it was interesting. From 67 through 70, it was pretty much the music scene between the Mamas and the Papas and then through Monterey Pop Festival.
Which is a big major thing.
Which is huge.
When it first started.
That was because Lou Adler and John Phillips produced it. They asked me to come back to do it. McCune Sound had always been doing sound at the fairgrounds in Monterey for the Monterey Jazz Festival. And so we were familiar with the room, the outdoor and the area. So I went in and put it together for the rock and roll world. And that's where we first met Jimi Hendrix. And he did his concert. Then after that was over, I was back in San Francisco when I got a call from Jerry Stickles, who was his road manager. They needed somebody to do sound. After, I don't know, it's an interesting sidelight. After Hendrix did the Monterey Pop Festival, he went out as the opening act for the Monkees, which was a television band that was put together.
Right, I remember the Monkees.
I do too.
Hey, we're the Monkees.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that lasted about a month because I think the mothers of America didn't think Hendrix was the proper opening act for their kids to see before the Monkees.
Might not have been.
So Hendrix. So I then went to Washington, D.C., which is where we did the first gig with him. And
and did you meet him at the Monterey Pop?
We met at Monterey back, just hello,
Yeah, but you have a lot of relationships. We're going to talk about it with Hendrix. What was your take on him? He's only a couple of years older than you.
He was, yeah. Unfortunately, he died very young. An interesting sidelight, much later on, I was doing Peter, Paul, and Mary. And we had just did a tour of Australia. And I came back, and this is when Hendrix had broken up with the Experience and was with Mitch Mitchell and Billy Cox and doing those last few concerts. And so we were sitting in a restaurant after a show, and I had purchased some raw opals in Australia. And I had them in a bag, and I brought them out, and Jimmy looked at it and said, "Oh, color is inside. It's psychedelic." And he swallowed one.
One of your opals?
Yeah.
He just swallowed it.
They thought it was psychedelic, you see.
Yeah, I get it. What did you say?
Well, hope you have a good trip, Jim. So,
and you didn't let him in on what? There was no psychedelic?
There was no psychedelics in it. It was just colored stone. But we had very little conversations other than that because he would always come on stage, work, and leave. So.
Yeah, but I'm sure you got a sense of the man because you're in tune to his voice, first of all.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I'm sure you can still hear it in your head.
Oh, God, maybe now that you reminded me.
Yeah.
It was interesting because he was very loud, and our sound systems were very mediocre and minor in those days. There was only 4 loudspeakers that we used on tour with him. But he was a master of his dynamics, so that when he was going to sing, all the music level went way down so you could get the voice over the top. And he did all of that himself, which made my job much simpler.
And you recognize it, I guess, right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And after that, it was with Peter, Paul, and Mary, which was a whole other world of sound. I mean, that was
harmony.
The balance of the 3 of them. Yeah. And I must say that working with them was an interesting experience not a Hendrix experience, but
I'm sure it was very different.
Peter taught me very much how to listen and what you're listening for, because he was always the one that tuned the band up when they were playing. So,
right. And they're all about harmony.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a very keen eye or sense of that. And what did he teach you? How
to listen.
And how do you do that? How do you learn to listen?
You focus on what you're looking at what you're listening to at the moment, and then add things on top of that. So
it's being in the moment.
It's a layering of things.
Yeah, it's really being in the moment.
And in the moment, yeah.
Yes,
absolutely true.
And training yourself to be able to do that, and then once you can understand how to do that, which I do that as just a daily practice, as I try mm-hmm. I try to be in the moment now, and mm-hmm. it allows you to, as you say, it gives you critical listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And listening to them and the balance of their voices, adding the instruments with them, is an old idea of texturing and layering.
Yes.
So that it makes some kind of musical sense.
Yes.
And that's helped me all the way through my career up until I retired.
Yes. And you have to do something a little different too, because I used to work with pro athletes, and I would go to a game. You can't watch the game. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming when you're at one of these concerts, you can't watch the concert you have to be focused as a professional to make sure that there's nothing technically wrong.
Well, when I was working, that's true. When I go to a concert now, I really don't go to concerts much anymore.
Right.
But you want to look at the overall whole, and I think.
Yes. And did you go to theater productions for the enjoyment of going and watching one? I don't mean ones you're working, but otherwise.
I did. I was very fortunate in 2014, 15, 16, 13, 14, 15. I was a Tony voter in New York, so I got to see everything that opened those seasons on Broadway. And
good seats.
And good seats. And not paid for them.
Yeah.
But so it was quite interesting to see all those other various shows. Of course, up until that time, their still sound wasn't recognized as
right.
a Tony nomination, and
right.
So we didn't looking at sound differently. But
yes, you were looking, because it wasn't your job wasn't to look at the sound design, but was to look at the overall
show. Yeah.
I bet you still attacked it.
Well,
similarly.
You did. If the sound was not good, maybe other things in the music, in the performance, were not as good.
That's right. Yeah. Plus, an incredible amount of lighting because you're around it, right? I assume.
Well,
you can't help but not, and you're fighting with them sometimes to be able to get your sound how you need it, and they're fighting to get the way they want it.
There's only so much real estate on either side of a stage that you can use between lights, sound, scenery, etc.
Right.
So it is a bit different.
Yeah, sometimes you would have to cover that, I'm sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and compromise is okay as long as it gives you the added result that you want at the end.
Right. Do you think you're a perfectionist when it comes to that?
At compromise?
No, I'm sure you're good at compromise. I have no doubt about that. I can tell that about you. No, I meant as far as trying to get the very best you could get.
Obviously. I mean, you want to. You're not doing something to be bad. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably why you made it to be the Godfather of Sound, I would imagine.
And I think my last professional show was 2019 or 2018 here with Arizona Theater Company downtown. Yes. Their production of The Music Man.
Yeah.
And
I was an actor about the same age you were in that Music Man.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. I didn't get ignited by acting then or anything. I enjoyed it. But
was that here in Tucson?
No, it was in New Mexico when I was a kid. Yeah, I grew up in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. So the last one was The Music Man for you.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And so kind of back to Peter, Paul, and Mary, because you're with them for a very long time, right?
2 years until they retired.
Yeah. But you're doing all their concerts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was looking at the number of concerts you went to. There's
quite a few.
Like 109 or some huge number.
Was it that many? Okay.
Yeah. And I'm trying to put my.
It was good. Part of it all came about was that Peter, Paul, and Mary produced they were their own concert promoters. Mm. So we had pretty much what we wanted to do, and it became easier. We had a rented truck and a truck driver who drove the equipment drove the equipment to the various gigs, and I set it up. We did the show, took it down, went away. We did the March on Washington with them.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
Um,
What was that like, just as a human experience?
this was the anti-Vietnam March,
Yeah.
not the Martin Luther King one, but yeah, it was quite a good experience. We flew in from, I don't know where we were doing the concert the night before. Got to the stage. I just mixed them because there was already a sound system set up, obviously. Finished their gig and their set. Got back on the plane and flew to the next concert. So
There had to be tens of thousands of people there.
it was on the mall, and yeah, it was quite large.
Yeah, do those moments stick in your mind as far as just looking out on this crowd? And Vietnam's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the people you're working with from an artist standpoint are very much against the war. And I
Yeah,
don't,
they were.
yeah, I'm sure. And to see that had to be moving, I'm sure.
Fortunately, I wasn't able to be drafted because I was 1Y. I had bad allergies, and so
Yes.
I was not involved in the war, but I was part of the anti-war movement through the artists that I was working with. So,
I would think. I mean, you're carrying their message, quite frankly. And yeah, it was such an important component of all our lives at that time. But you were in the thick of it. I mean, you're in the Summer of Love. You're there in '67, right?
that's correct.
You know, you're part of the Monterey Pop Festival, the beginning
Which
one.
started it, and then went on, and the concerts in Golden Gate Park,
And
things like that.
some of that you were doing, I'm sure, attending as a human being,
Mm-hmm.
just going. Yeah, what was that whole atmosphere like in '67?
I don't remember.
Yeah. That's a joke, folks.
The
Your hair was longer.
hair was longer. I had some then.
Uh-huh.
It was a time where everything sort of just melded into place.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't, you weren't putting things aside where
Yes.
you had to just focus on one thing. And so the Summer of Love was a peaceful time. And,
Yeah, very much, right?
yeah. And I think it also helped having a Jesuit education from high school and
Yes.
college. It also helped, having been on the road and seeing what other parts of the country were doing and
Right.
things were like. So it
Right.
was all very interesting.
Yeah, and you're 23.
Hmm.
You know?
I got older.
Yeah. No, you got old fast, I bet.
Yeah, I went from being 21 to 30. It's,
I bet. You almost had to be.
you know,
We were in charge of the sound
Mm-hmm.
design and the message, too. And you had some critical taskmasters in some of these. It sounds like were Peter, Paul, and
Peter
Mary.
was very good. Yeah, and John Phillips was very good with the Mamas and Papas. And
Yes, I bet.
Jimmy never really came out to listen. He was always on stage. So
Yeah. He was
it was pretty much on my own with him.
Yeah.
But
Though I'm sure to get to the level he was, he understood sound
Mm-hmm.
tremendously. You know, the fact he could modulate his voice over the music himself.
correct.
You know, he just didn't have to do anything because he had somebody that knew what they were doing. And you
Well, he knew what he was doing too. So
Yeah, I'm sure. And he stayed with it. You stayed with him through the whole thing pretty much, right?
I didn't
just
do
to
his
the-
last three concerts.
Yeah.
That I had to get back to New York, to Los Angeles, but we did the Isle of Wight with him, and then he went on to Germany,
Yes.
and then went back to London, and was resting because he was going to then go to do the Montreux Jazz Festival in Switzerland, which is when he died. So
That must have been extremely difficult for you.
it was. I was doing a Blood, Sweat, and Tears concert at the Hollywood Bowl when we got the news. And then a week or so, I forget how long it was, we went up to Seattle for the funeral.
Yeah, that was a very exclusive, small gathering, right? What was that like?
It was, it was quiet and respectful. You know, the band was there, his management was there, the relatives were there, and he was buried in Seattle. And there was a party afterwards, but I left, so
Yeah, you probably had to work.
I had to get back. Yeah,
Yeah. But you also tried to go see him in Woodstock, too, right?
I did. We were supposed to go to Woodstock. He was supposed to perform on Saturday. And I was going to be able to see him. And got up there, and things were delayed and delayed in the weather. And he wasn't going to go on until Sunday night. And I had to get back to New York. So I left before I saw any of the performances or anything of that sort.
Did you get to see any of them performances?
Not that I remember.
Would you fly in a helicopter, or how did you get there?
No, we got on a station wagon. We were able to get in and out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think John Morris, when I interviewed him, he said he booked Morris. He booked Hendrix for that show, and he was the highest paid act. Yeah. It was like $35K, I think, is what he said that they paid him for that. I'd have to listen to the podcast again.
I thought it was 10, but maybe it was 35.
Yeah, John probably remembered too.
Nobody paid for it. Yeah.
Yeah, because he was doing and I think John was asleep when he finally came on in the morning. It was early morning when he did his famous thing.
He woke everybody up with the Star Spangled Banner. That's for sure. Yeah.
Did that get out and around? Did people know that in the world of music? Because you're right in the thick of all that.
He played the Star Spangled Banner in some of his live concerts too. So.
Yes. And were you there when he did those?
Some of them, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And was it anything that you go, that's something different?
Well, it was just the instrumental portion of it. So, and it was in quite heavily loud in parts.
Right.
So
from a sound technique, probably was a struggle.
So he didn't play the whole thing, but it was just that was some of it.
You see, you might view it differently than others because you're trying to get the sound perfect, and it's difficult to do. Is that true?
Correct. Well, it was. That again, like I say, there was no vocal on that, so that made it a lot easier for me. I was basically just amplifying the drums at that point.
Right.
Because we didn't amplify his guitar or the bass.
Yes. And so you continue to work with all these major people, and then at some point you go, I think it's 1970, you make this switch
to theater.
Yeah.
It was again through Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul and Mary that I met Michael Butler, who was the producer of Hair. And Peter said, Abe is our sound guy, because Hair was having some sound problems in New York, and they were opening a new production in Boston. So I went to Boston to put the new show in there. And then I went back to New York and redid the sound system there, and then did the most of the rest of the tours in the United States, and 4 productions in Europe. So.
And you're flying back and forth to Europe and doing all these too, right?
Yep.
You just were killing it as far as physically.
We didn't have mileage in those days. So.
Yeah, but I mean, you're gone all the time, right? I mean, you're completely and utterly engrossed in this. I mean, how could you
Pretty
not
much
be?
so. And then it ended up being much easier in 71. Ended up back in New York, and then pretty much stayed there the rest of my career. And sick going out to do road companies or setting up out-of-town tryouts. But I moved into an apartment in New York City in 1974 and stayed in that same apartment until 2017 when I moved back here. So
2017, yeah. So but when you're doing Hair, and then that's 70, right? Mm-hmm. And you do Superstar.
Superstar was 71.
71.
And then I did Pippin.
Yes.
Because Bob Fosse had gone to see Superstar and liked it, and so he was doing this new show with Stephen Schwartz, who was a young punk composer. And so I ended up doing that.
And he was a taskmaster.
He was a taskmaster. And we were good friends, worked together until towards the very end, and then he didn't like any of us very much. So it was, I don't know whether we did wrong by him or whether he was just getting on in his ways. But the last show I did was a thing called Big Deal, which was not a book musical, but it was a bit of musical numbers put together by dance. And he somehow thought it could have been different. So, I mean, and then he went on, and then he passed away shortly thereafter.
Right. I mean, he obviously was from what I can understand, was very much a perfectionist. Mm-hmm. Also didn't really think he didn't really believe he was as good as he really was.
That's right. He said, I'm never going to be very good at that.
It's this imposter syndrome that people have sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that makes it tough.
Yeah. And I was fortunate too also with with Bob Fosse, I got to work with three very brilliant directors, which I think is an important part of the theater. And we don't have the directors today that we did then. The Bob Fosses, the Michael Bennetts, the Gower Champions, the Hal Prince. All of those four people were the people who did what was theater. Today, because of the spectacle, it's a little bit more diverse in all the things that they're doing. But
and bigger productions, I would think,
productions,
right? And things that are related to comics and other things too, I would think.
Or old movies.
Yeah, or old movies. And so again, you're doing these first ones in 70, 71. You're 30, basically 31. You're still a young guy, but now you have all this experience. I would assume you're in great demand. Other people are wanting to use you for other things.
I think I was busy enough.
You just said, this is good.
Yeah. It didn't, and it sort of until 89 or 90 when I got really tired of the rigors of doing a Broadway production, a new one each time. So that's when I ended up getting involved with New York City Opera and moving up to Lincoln Center.
Okay.
And of course, that was a whole other world too. But
yeah, we'll get there. You still got some more amazing theatrical plays that you've done because you just stopped at Pippin, but there's a few others that came. Well,
after Pippin was Chicago.
Yes.
And Chorus Line,
which were doing both at the same time.
Yeah, that was interesting.
How did that happen? That you ended up doing both two major important musicals at the same time for the Sound?
We were doing Chicago had planned first, and we were out of town in Philadelphia.
Yes.
For the tryout, and that's when I got a call from Michael Bennett, who remembered me from a tour of Seesaw that I happened to end up doing for him. And he said, we're doing this little workshop down at the Public Theater, and could you come in and give us some advice? And so flying back and forth between Philadelphia and New York on the train was interesting to do. But it was interesting working with both of them. Both of those people. Fortunately, Chorus Line became the much bigger hit than Chicago.
Yes. Huge hit.
Yeah, and yet now Chicago is the revival of Chicago, which opened, I forget how, I didn't do it. Has now been the longest running American musical of all.
Wow.
And I think that the reason that it became so successful was the story of Chicago was the lawyer Billy Flynn who got them out. The revival happened at the same time as the O.J. trial in Los Angeles, and there was his lawyers who were the Billy Flynn characters.
Yes, they
and
were.
People were able to, the audience were able to relate that the lawyer gets them off.
Yeah.
So.
And when you're doing we're talking. And there's other ones you worked on too that are big, and we'll talk about. But how does that work from a reimbursement? I mean, you have this show like Chicago or Chorus Line that do incredibly well. You're involved with Cats for a period of that. Do you get something?
There wasn't in those days, but there is. The designers today are all part of the union, designers union, which has a set weekly royalty that's to be paid and a fee based on the kind of shows that it is.
Yes.
Of course, big designers can always negotiate more. But in those days, $100 a week was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that was,
And that's how it was.
That's how it was.
Didn't matter how successful the show was.
No, that's what they paid the sound designer, if they paid him anything. And it worked out all right because if you had 5 shows running at the same time,
yes,
that it sort of added up. But you got a set fee and a weekly royalty and expenses when you're on the road.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
Today it's a little easier.
Yeah, they recognize that they should. I mean, it seems like you should be a part of it. I mean, it's an important component of why it succeeds.
Fortunately, I was there at the beginning when we kind of started the Sound Designers Union and brought a number of people into it, and then we went into an agreement with Local One to represent sound designers all over, and then the Local One decided they didn't want to represent because they were stagehands, not designers. Excuse me. And we merged with United Scenic Artists, which has all the other design elements. And ever since that time, the sound design contracts have become pretty much on a par with with the other design elements of
one
the
would
theater.
think.
I mean, certainly scenery is still the big cheese, but
it's only because it's visual and you can't not see it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too about sound is that all of the other elements, the design elements, are visual. I mean, scenery, lighting, and costumes. Basically,
and actors too.
You're all looking at the same thing. Sound is everybody hears differently.
Yeah, and your job is to really make it seamless, right? So it seems like it's natural.
All part of it. Natural in those days. Today, it's not so natural anymore.
Yeah. And what do you think about that?
It's immersive, so
yeah.
And I guess it's fine. It's nothing that I would want to do, but
yes.
I don't think I would want to do it.
You would.
If something came along that was really, really tasty and exciting, it might be a thing to get back to do. But
yeah, and maybe you could explain to people. I have a sense of what sound design is, but what is your definition of what someone who is a sound designer does?
Well, in the early days when I started, the sound designer was to put together a sound system that would enable every audience member to hear what it sounds like at the source, whether it be an instrument or a musician or a vocalist.
Okay.
So recreating that realism of the volume and tonality and shading of what the voice or the instrument was doing, you were to recreate that in every room, every seat in the theater.
Right. Which is a challenge.
It's a challenge.
Because every theater is different.
Every theater is different, and we didn't have things where you could put loudspeakers in various places and still make it seem like it's coming from the stage. So
right.
That worked out differently. But that's basically what I always felt sound design was.
Mm-hmm.
And anything else you wanted to do other than that was special effects.
Mm. And would there be someone that does the special effects?
Well, special effects as far as sound concerned. I'm talking about sound effects.
Right.
Which you would create in a studio or go out and record
but you would
live.
still be involved in the process of implementing it and making it function correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, the sound effects were always the bailiwick of the stage manager and the first electrician who would put together on a record pre-recorded sound effects and record them and then play them back on a tape recorder. But
right.
That was it.
Yeah. But it still required sound, your expertise to do it.
One of the other things that I first did with sound was sound was always operated by the third electrician backstage and came in and turned the sound mixer on.
Mm-hmm.
And they came in to turn on the show at half hour.
Right.
Put the knobs where they're supposed to be with the chalk mark.
Right.
And left it alone until time to turn it off at the end of the performance.
Right.
And I said, the guy's got to be out in front of the house where he can hear what's doing. He's got to be able to mix depending upon where people are standing and what volumes are being done and things of that sort. So getting the management and the operators to be used to being out inside the house and listening. And that's one of the major things that I think I accomplished. That's the standard today is
making them listen.
Making them listen and being in the house to mix from and not being backstage.
Yes. Yeah, that makes complete and utter sense that you would be in charge and do that component. And that was probably revolutionary in its time.
Well, yeah, because they, in a smaller theater, if you're taking out 6 seats, that's a lot of money that they're losing.
Yeah. It's a financial thing for sure.
Hair, we were in a box in front of the balcony, so it didn't lose any seats.
Yeah, well, there was one, right, which was, I think, Jesus Christ Superstar, where they wanted to cover up the orchestra, and then
that was the original. That was the original intent, was to make it sound like a recording, and have everything close mic'd and amplified. That sort of negates the whole purpose of live sound, and because it wasn't very good, it didn't sound great. So one of the other things I did was took all the covering off the top of the orchestra.
And that's a big deal when you're talking to the director and everything, and this is just when it's that they're trying to get it to go, right?
Yeah. So we did the sound system first, and then the opening up the orchestra pit was later on. It works in a studio because you don't have any reference to live sound. You're recording it, and that's what you're playing it back at. When you're listening to it in the theater, there may be a little spillage that comes out, but you want to have as much of the live feel as possible. Now, that's not true today. They've got orchestras in rooms all over the theater. And it's all piped in, and it's all amplified to the same extent and same degree of tonality that everything else is. So it works. But in those days, it didn't.
Right. Would you say that in those days that sound was kind of a second thought in a way?
The bastard child, can I say that?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't want to say that, but yes.
Yeah, it was never really thought of as part of the creative part of the theater. So
yeah, that had to be irritating.
It was, and I think I helped start that change too.
Yeah, because that's the thing. You're an artist.
I think so.
100%.
Or a creator, anyway.
That's an artist,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, you have an artist mindset. You work with artists. You work well with artists. Lots of hard artists because you understand the artist mindset.
Yeah, you have to deal with their peculiarities as well.
That's right. And I think that you can do it if you're an artist.
And bear in mind that we have to redo it so that it comes to the common good, because everybody here is slightly different.
Right.
And so we're telling them what they're doing is going to be another form of the design element, is making it all work in a cohesive whole.
Of course. You're looking at a picture, basically, and you're trying to make the picture work.
I guess it works if you're talking about pictures and working.
Yeah. No, I mean, they're cinematography pictures, moving pictures, whatever you want to look at. But, I think most definitely you're a creator and an artist. And it's interesting that you have to think about, am I an artist?
Yeah, the art and design of sound.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no. I mean, when you have these conversations with your friends, do you say, do you go, I'm an artist?
No, I've never really looked at it quite that way.
I can see.
But I can see how you could.
Absolutely.
Do it. I'm a designer, so that's another form of art.
Absolutely. 100%. It's all correct. So a lot of, you have an interesting, how I see it, you have a very interesting mindset. You have a right and a left brain that have to work very well together. You have to be very analytical at certain things, but you also have to see the whole big picture and the creation and the set and the dot, all that, the music.
Well, it all has to work together. I mean,
yes.
That's the thing. And we enjoy if when the show does come together and it works, it's fine. There's nothing more fulfilling than that. And it's a great experience.
And there are those episodes where it doesn't come together.
Sometimes.
Or it's not a great hit, like what, Timbuktu, was that?
Well, Timbuktu was okay. There are other shows that
didn't make it onto
didn't make it. Yeah.
And do you take those personal when that happens?
I didn't. No.
That's smart.
Fortunately, I was able to do a lot of shows that were hits, so I didn't have to deal with.
Yeah, and we still haven't covered them all. So you did.
Yeah.
You work with National Lampoon, right?
National Lampoon. We did Lemmings as their thing, which has started Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, right. I mean, that was the thing, right? That was Chevy Chase, was
and John Belushi.
And did you get to know any of those individuals?
John, I knew relatively well because I had a summer place up in Martha's Vineyard. So
yes.
We would see him up there every once in a while. But,
he was an interesting human, wasn't he?
Indeed he was.
Well, I would think you guys would get along fabulous, and this is why, because you have a very keen wit.
I think so.
You do. I know you do. I mean, and he does. He did too. I'm sure he recognized that.
Yeah, we did. We did. He did the two shows that Chevy and John did Lemmings, and then and I did Gilda Radner's one-woman show on Broadway.
Yeah, what was that like? That's one person I would have loved to
She was terrific. Yeah.
Yeah, she seemed to be.
And
she was just genuinely a nice person, wasn't she? Yeah.
Then Liza Minnelli, of course, in the act.
Was that hard to do her because of the way her voice is?
No, it was okay. The problem with the act was that it started off being one thing and ended up being another, and when they meshed the two different things together, it was a little awkward. So.
And you probably recognize that.
Yeah, I mean, started with one director and ended up with another, and
yeah, you probably could tell if a theater production was going to do well. You probably knew almost before it even went out, didn't you? To some extent.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I certainly knew with Chorus Line and with Chicago and with Pippin and Superstar to some extent.
Yeah.
What else did I do after that?
Well, you did Cats I
did Cats in London.
Yes.
And in America, but I I didn't do the rest of the American productions. We had a falling out with the composer, and so we went our separate ways.
Yes. Yeah, that was a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And Evita, of course.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting thing. And you had to, in that one, you had to portray older mics to make it work, but
they were older mics, but we had the newer mics hidden inside them.
Yes. Oh, whose idea was that?
It was the set designers. He wanted to use these microphones, and I said, well, they're not going to sound good, so let me put real mics inside them, and then we did.
Yeah, common sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just making it work.
But they were Tim and Tazina, the designers of Evita in London, were very special, and they did everything that we needed them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that show only had 5 wireless microphones in it, so and everything else was mics in the area and around. It's interesting. Evita, had it opened in the United States, I don't think it would have been the hit that it became. Having opened in London and had that special sense about it, coming to America, the big hit from England.
Right, and it's an international kind of subject matter too. Yeah. And did you enjoy your European, the things that you did? Because you were all over.
I did in London very much.
Yes.
I rented a house and had some good times there, and had very good friends that still do. The company that started the sound company for Chorus Line in London, Autograph Sound, is now a major player in the world of English theater, and I sort of helped them get started.
And what theaters would you work in London?
Drury Lane, primarily, the King Edward, Prince Edward, and what else?
That's a hard one to do, I would think, sound-wise, the way that auditorium is so big and double-decked. And
well, it's triple-decked.
I was just there, actually, to hear Gregory Porter 2 weeks ago in there.
In Drury Lane?
In the Prince
Edward.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was interesting when I'm in there. I'm thinking, and I don't know, I didn't even know we were going to do this. I think at that time, or maybe I did. It's probably why I was thinking about it. I did know. I was thinking how hard this would be to actually do the sound. You know, these big auditoriums, and you did huge things too, right? With these.
Well, when it was, because when you go on the road, your Broadway house is 1,100 to 1,500 seats maximum.
Right.
You go on some of these performing arts centers that are 3,000 seats.
Right. You've done Carnegie Hall, for instance.
Well, I don't consider that a theater provider.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's a performance. It's a performance space, and it's quite terrific. But Centennial Hall here in Tucson.
Yes.
Is quite large. And has some sound problems every once in a while, but. So you have to prepare for all the eventualities that you're going to find when you go out on the road.
Do you think about those before you even get there?
When it's it's going to be a road tour, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And basically the front end of the system, which the microphones, the mixing console, amplifiers, loudspeakers, are all pretty much the same. But then you just add on to that basic system to cover the larger rooms that you're playing in.
Mm-hmm. And some of the things that I'm sure you invented things that no one had ever done before. Whether they're still being used today or not, I don't know, but I would assume that's...
Well, delay systems in the theater, so that
yes,
sound travels at a certain speed through the air, and it comes out of one speaker, but if you're amplifying it to another speaker, the electronics are much faster, so you want to electronically delay the sound coming out of the back speaker, so it's timed to the front one, so it all sounds like it's coming from one place.
Is that like a Doppler effect type?
Well, the Doppler effect is part of what it is, but you want to eliminate that. You want it to be, a cohesive whole.
Right.
So those were one of the things that we ended up dealing with was in putting delay systems in so that they worked.
And did you recognize that from just hearing it, from critical listening?
You do. You listen, and when you have one set of loudspeakers on either side of the stage, and that's trying to cover the whole room, it becomes a little awkward when you're close to it.
Right.
When it fades away when you get back. So you want to make the sound even throughout the room.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, it's making the sound the same in every seat in the house.
Yeah, because it's physics. I remember the Doppler effect in physics, learning it in college.
Yeah.
It's like, the train comes here, goes there. This is why.
Correct. So that's.
And I saw some of your drawings of the things that you would do to set up when you would go there and all the different, you look like an engineer.
Well, fortunately, I had engineers that were able to operate and, make some sense out of those drawings.
Well, they were very clear, obviously, to the person who did it, but and you wrote them, right? You would make them, yeah.
I didn't do a lot of the drafting myself, but
yeah. Well, you're the creator. You're the creative.
That's right. Do it this way.
And so, you finished kind of your theatrical career. What was the last? You did a show. What was your last show?
The last Broadway musical was Gershwin's Fascinating Rhythm, which was started here at Arizona Theater Company.
Yes.
That was in 1999.
Yes.
So I like to keep saying my last Broadway show was last century.
Though you got a Tony in 2024, right?
Yes, but that was for special. That was a special award, not for any particular show, just for a lifetime of achievement.
I think that's a bigger deal, don't you?
I think so. Yeah, it was quite nice.
Yeah, it was for so many years you weren't even eligible.
Correct.
So you couldn't win if you for Pippin or one of these others there was no
consideration for the art of sound design by the Tony administration committee.
Yes.
So in '99 was Gershwin's Fascinating Rhythm. I then did a concert on Broadway called Rain, which was a tribute to the Beatles.
Yes.
I did most of those same guys earlier on in a show called Beatlemania.
Yes. Yeah, we didn't talk about that. That was a very important and very well received.
It was fun doing that again.
Yeah, I remember when that was out.
And Paul came to see it. George Martin came to see it. Thought we did a good job.
Wow.
So Rain was in 2005 or 6, something like that. And then from then on, I went to City Opera and City Ballet and started doing operas up there, and then coming here to Tucson to do Arizona Theater Company productions.
Mm-hmm.
And
was that one of the reasons that brought you back to Tucson?
No, I have relatives here, of course, and I kept coming. I used to come here between Thanksgiving and New Year's all the time, just to get away from New York in the winter.
Did you ever come and see us? Our
No.
gallery? We'll change that.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I'm here now.
Yeah, no, I'll show you everywhere. I'll show you my museum. But, and so, yeah, you wanted to get back to Tucson.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they were looking for you when they said,
I was
Abe
fortunate.
Jacob
It worked out with David Goldstein, who was the director at the time, knew me, and we did some shows with him. So it was good. And like I said, 2018 was Music Man was the last thing I really wanted to do, and I have no desire to do anything anymore, really.
Yes, I get it. I mean, you're 80.
Yeah,
you're due.
I am. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, you're welcome. 1944.
Uh-huh.
I remember October
44.
Yeah. The amount of time that you did on the road and all these things, I think that's what impressed me as much as anything when I was reading your book and looking back at your life to try to understand you. And I mean, you pushed it.
Mm-hmm.
You did.
I
You're
did.
driven.
I didn't seem like I was doing that much at the time. It just had one thing right after another, and it just sort of all fortunately fell into place, and it made a lot of sense.
It's who you were. It was your journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you knew this journey, it sounds like, from maybe when you were 9.
It was a journey, but not a trek.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but you knew what your role was in life, and you embraced it and went after it.
Yeah, and I had a hell of a good time doing it. I can't say hell, but
yeah, you can say hell. You can say whatever you want. Yeah. Did you take the time when you're going and doing all this to realize, oh, this is something important while I'm at the mall, with Peter, Paul, and Mary?
I knew what I was doing had an impact on the audiences that would come to see us.
The world.
So that was good. I didn't spend much time when we were traveling doing other things other than working. So yeah. I missed a lot of that. But I went to a lot of places. So I mean, we did a concert with Peter, Paul, and Mary on the steps of the Sydney Opera House before it opened.
Oh my God.
And it was 1970, yeah. Yeah. And so it was for a television special. And
yeah.
So we did that. It was great to do that. Tivoli Gardens, we did a couple of concerts in.
Yeah, I was just there.
Yeah. The Albert Hall. with
Yeah.
Hendrix.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I was just at
some
Copenhagen.
great places to do.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know if it's true, but I think the fact that you were so driven and singularly focused on your job is one of the reasons all these artists wanted you.
Well, I hope
Because
I gave them what they were looking for and listening to,
yeah, that's why.
and we got on well with them, and
Yes.
it didn't get in their way.
Yeah. Well, that's part of it, right?
Hmm.
That it's easy to get an ego when you're doing something like that and being around these people. I can tell you don't have that.
I tried not to. I mean, it's what good does it do you? And
Yeah. I mean, that might be the big takeaway, is that if you let your ego get in the way, I mean, you're with all these important people, important places, and I don't get a sense of, oh, look at me at all.
Illustrating that, there was a show that we did on tour called the Will Rogers Follies, that Larry Gatlin played the role of Will Rogers.
Yeah.
And in the original Broadway production, Gregory Peck was the voice of Florence Ziegfeld, coming from speakers in the back of the theater. Unfortunately, he had passed away the year before we were going to do the show. So trying to find a significant voice to be Ziegfeld.
Right.
The producer, Larry Allen, said, well, I have a friend who's got a recognizable voice. We've been friends for a long time. Maybe he'll be happy to do it. So I got a call a couple of days later saying, would you send your social security number to this address and have a plane meeting you at LaGuardia. That's how you're going to fly up to Kennebunkport, Maine. Okay, you're going to record President Bush as the voice of Florence Ziegfeld. 41, not 43.
Yes.
So I get in the plane, get to LaGuardia, get to Portland, Maine. Car picks me up. We drive to Kennebunkport. They have the Walker's Point compound is there, and there are a lot of little cottages. One of them was set up as his office. So I asked his assistant, "Can I set up?" He said, go ahead and set up." I figured I'd set up my microphones like this, and he'd come in. Well, he was sitting there in his office working on something. I said, "Mr. President, can we say?" He said, "Go right ahead. If I'm in your way, let me know."
Right.
Set up the mics. We did the thing. He said, "I've never done this before." I said, "Well, imagine Florence Ziegfeld was sort of like the president, but more like George Bush than Lyndon Johnson." And so my humor got in the way again. So I was giving him, notes about his production and performance. He did that. He did the voice. It was great. We recorded it. It was over with. He said, "Let's go have some lobster rolls." So went to up to the house, and had lobster rolls for lunch. Got back in the car, went back to the airport, flew back to New York. I like to say, so one day you're having lobster rolls in Maine with the president, and the next day you're in the orchestra pit moving music stands with the prop department. So that's the conflict and the contrast.
That's true.
What you're doing, and it's all part of the same job.
Yeah, no, it is, and you take it all seriously. Moving the things in the concert hall are just, if not more important, than what you're doing. It's all the same. That's where you let your ego go.
Yeah, you've just got to do what you've got to do.
Yeah, you when you get back and you're going to move those, stands, you can't go, "Oh, I was with the president yesterday."
No, I can do it today.
Yeah, I can now. I do think that's what makes a successful person, if they can do that. And it's hard. I think.
And you got to be able to move back and forth between the two worlds.
Yes.
Doing amplified sound for Broadway musicals, and then doing non-amplified sound for opera.
Yes.
To contrast, but still the same thing. It's
and then also all those big gigs that you did at outdoor concerts with all these people. That's a completely different skill set too.
Yeah.
And that kind of doing all those bands early on is what brought it into
you get your whole background and whole experience. It's all the experiences that you have, not just Jimmy's, but
yeah. Well, I mean, having been in London and then going to Superstar. And that London can do it, but they can't. That's part of the experience you're bringing back to New York at that very moment when you're 22 or whatever it is, 20, whatever, young, 26, I think. So
an interesting thing about Superstar originally, the original sound designer, who wasn't really a sound designer, but had done that concert at Madison Square Garden, he decided not to do sound anymore, so he went to Hollywood to become a producer. And the first movie he produced was the thing called Mean Streets.
Oh,
So,
wow. Well, that's interesting.
John Taplin was his name.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, you probably had connections with a lot of these different people. I mean, just through Lauren Bacall's friendship, too.
I guess closest relationships are still people like John Kander, the composer,
Yes.
was a good friend, and some of the other folks.
Yeah. And you have a place in New York.
Not anymore.
No, but you did.
Yeah.
And so that's a place to entertain and meet people and talk. And where in New York were you?
On the Upper East Side, 63rd, between Park and Lexington.
Yeah, nice area.
It was close to get to LaGuardia, the airport, so I could get in and out of town.
I have no doubt that's exactly why you went with that place too.
Yeah.
Because you're practical in that sense, right? I mean,
And it was also convenient, but it was, it was.
Yeah.
We found it and stayed there for a long time.
Yeah, that's so funny. So you've lived this life. You have the moniker of the Godfather of Sound. Somebody who's going to consider this as a profession, sound design, and I know things have changed, but what would you tell them are the important recipe?
Experience as much live sound as you can. Go whether it's just listening to street traffic on the side or an animal barking. Go to concerts where you can hear or instruments live. Go to opera, hear voices live. Get as much experience inside you of what reality is, and then you can take that and augment it and modify it and make it all kinds of special things that would be good for you. But
critical listening.
Yeah,
that's the number one thing. And it was for you. It was a wonderful life. It seems like
it has been. It was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that I was able to do it, and I wouldn't have changed it for anything. I don't think.
No, I can't imagine you.
Unless there was a lot more money involved.
Even then, I'm not sure you would have.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like you knew what you wanted right off the bat.
And I'm fortunate in that I was able to train a lot of people who work with me.
Yes, that's a big component of who you are and your legacy.
And they're all doing it now, so
yes,
that makes me feel very good.
Yes. Is there anyone out of that group that strikes you want to discuss?
Well, the first operator I had was a man by the name of Otz Munderloh, who mixed a chorus line for us and did a terrific job, and then went on to design his own shows. And then another fellow by the name of Steve Kennedy, who's designed his own shows. And then Nevin Steinberg today, who is probably one of the premier designers on Broadway. He did a little show called Hamilton.
God. Did you get to go see it?
I did. I've seen it 3 or 4 times.
Yes. It has to make you feel good, though, when you go, I have a component of this. And, it is your legacy.
And they call and ask, what do you think of it? And I give them my opinion, and I try to temper it with reality. But
yeah.
So it's been very good to have those. And there's a lot of other ones, but those are the 3 that
stick out, kind of.
Yeah.
Anything else that we've left out or we should talk about?
I don't. You pretty much covered it all. You read the book, so it's there.
I paid attention.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I wanted to be present so I could listen.
Well, that's the important thing, is listening.
Mm-hmm. Being in the moment and critical listening, I think you hit it right on the head.
Yeah, and also you experience the live moment of theater. If anything else you're going to do is as a film or recorded, but live is where I find it's at. That's why I never really wanted to do movies.
Yeah, because it didn't have that human instant moment of connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And getting immediate reaction to the audience from what you're doing for them.
Yeah, I wondered about that, why you didn't, because I'm sure you could have transitioned to the movies easily.
Yeah. I did a couple of recordings, but nothing that even doing recordings is different than live.
It lost. Well, a lot of actors want to just do theater too, right? They don't want to. I mean, they may do the movies, but they want to do theater.
Sure, that's where the money is. But
yeah, but for them and for you, it's that connection to instantaneous connection to the audience and to the people that are involved, and you're part of that cast. Each one of those, you're part of the cast.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and you're on the bill, I'm sure, on every one of them.
They were concerned about where you get your name on the program, on the playbill and on the program and on the posters. But that's one of the other things I insisted on was, if we're going to be a designer, we should be up there with the other designers. Yes. So people realize that sound is an important part, an integral part of what it is we're doing.
Do you have any of those that you kept?
I have some theater posters.
Can we get a photo or image of those? I'd like to put that on the podcast so they can see it.
Can I send you something
Yeah.
in an email?
Yeah, just send it. I'll put it on. I think it's important. It's part of the story for sure. This is great.
All right. Well, I hope this has solved what you wanted to hear about.
Yeah.
And ended up being okay. I guess we've taken up about an hour of your time. So.
Oh, I bet it's more than that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm having a really good time just kind of flies. I don't think about. I can't tell. But,
okay. Well, that's great. I'm glad that we have had this chance to talk.
Yeah, because sound design is something it's part of the arts. I love arts. I love creators. I love individuals that donate their life to making a difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know about this field. So it allowed me the opportunity to get to understand it.
I'm glad we've got another convert in the...
Yeah, you do, actually. Well, the funny thing is, I'm never going to go to a live show or anything like that again and look at it the same way.
Or listen to it the same way.
That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, listen, see, right? It's all, you're all part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's changed the way I'm going to look at things.
Good.
Yeah, so I'll be much more a critical listener.
That's the important thing, is being able to instruct the audience to know what that they're looking at, listening to,
right. Yeah.
and enjoying.
And enjoying it. Yeah, and maybe a deeper level.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Abe. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time and energy. I know you didn't have to do any of this, and it was
my pleasure. I'm glad I was able to come all the way out here, and Tim was good to.
Yeah, well, I think you're such an important person. That's what this whole podcast is about: is to capture these voices, because you have a very important story, and so other people know it and have it, and it lives on in perpetuity.
Well, I hope the voice was loud enough for this.
It was just fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so was the content.
Terrific. Okay then.
All right, very good. Let me help you.
Oh, thank you.